Hello, everyone. Today we have an audio call because we're struggling with the internet connection. A few days ago, I was speaking to my friend, Dr. Bianca de Canha, and obviously lockdown came into the conversation. And we got joking about how in 8 or 9 months' time, there could be a baby boom because people are bored and they have nothing else to do. And we remember the big baby booms of New York City back in the day. And well, this globally could be another one of those situations. So the conversation went a little bit further, and I thought it would be fun to invite Bianca onto one of these, and I use air quotes right now, shows, because my new step brother-in-law called it that, and talk to her about her speciality. She's a homeopath, and she has a lot of really useful insights into a lot of really interesting things. So on the back of the baby boom conversation, I got thinking about fertility and infertility. And I know that Bianca, in her practice, has a fair amount of experience in that. Hi, Bianca.
Hi, Jason.
Bianca, it's incredible. And I'm now 43 years old. And in my experience conversationally and within kind of my closest circles, people at this age are even openly having more and more conversations around infertility. I've met so many people that have been trying for a long time to have kids, and the range is from months and months to even years. What do you think's going on here?
There's a lot happening at the moment. We've got to look at many things. A lot of us have put off having children for much later on in our lives, which also comes with its risks. We prioritize an education, settling into a career, and then only do we look into having children, which then allows for a lot of time for things to perhaps go wrong. We've also got to look at what the stresses of our lives are going to ultimately do to our fertility. I often say to patients that you really must look at fertility as the luxury of your body, and your fertility really only works well and as it should when everything else in your system is working correctly. So if you're having issues in terms of high stress and poor sleep and poor diet, all those type of things, that's going to essentially negatively impact your fertility. And I think that's what's happening, is because of us prolonging the point of actually having children, and as a result being exposed to all of these excess stresses amongst other things, it's becoming harder and harder for us to conceive at the point that we decide we want to.
And I've heard so many stories about people that are trying and trying and trying, and eventually they give up trying and they fall pregnant.
Yeah, I think, having had this experience with couples, everyone wants to be that statistic. Everyone wants to be that couple that when they gave up, they fell pregnant. And admittedly, I have had some, whether it was that they, decided to try an assisted IVF, for example, and after it failing, they then fell pregnant in the next cycle. However, it is few and far between. And the truth is, how do you truly give up if it's fundamentally something you so desperately want and so desperately need? And how do you define that? What is giving up so that I can be that person that falls pregnant in the next cycle after I've, in inverted commas, given up?
Such a good question. So it sounds like it could be more of a story than anything, but it sounds like there are two aspects to this. The one is the relaxation about a person, so the stress in their lives and how they handle that, how they internalize it, and how it manifests physiologically with them. And the other is how late they leave it. What is late?
It depends. I could ask you the same as how long is a piece of string?
Okay, so if I may, let me ask it differently. So what is the risk in terms of fertility between the age of 30 and 45? In other words, 45 having less chance of falling pregnant.
So I think we're all very conditioned into the idea, or at least the medical advice, that your fertility decreases with age, which absolutely it does. However, we have to look at the health of the individual. If you are smoking and consuming excessive amounts of alcohol and eating poorly and under huge amounts of stress, and absolutely that individual's fertility is going to decline far greater during that particular gap. However, if we have a person who's health conscious, exercising regularly, managing their stress, they're looking after themselves, they're getting good rest, eating well, then who's to say that fertility will necessarily decrease? And in my experience, I've had a lot of patients who, for example, one in particular at the age of 43 was able to conceive beautifully, identical twins, and carried beautifully, where the medical world had really said to her there was just no chance. So it really is dependent on the individual's state of health.
Yes.
And what they are able to turn around in the time that they need to in order to then get that ultimate pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. And everyone's different. So once everyone's exhausted their own logical options of being healthy by eating healthily, going to gym, getting fit, getting their recovery heart rate to be quicker, and so on, from a natural perspective, what could some of the next steps be?
So usually, we don't generally see couples when a patient sees when a homeopath sees a patient who is seeking advice in terms of fertility. They've usually done it all, in the sense that they've been to the gynaes, they've consulted the specialists, they've perhaps, some of them, if they can afford to, would have done some assisted therapies. So generally they get to the homeopath having tried everything except the health options. It really is, it's not common knowledge. It's not people aren't very aware of the fact that when you decide to fall pregnant, it's not about making sure that you have a healthy pregnancy. It's making sure that you have a healthy state of being before conception even. So it's not often that we see people who come to us who have already done the exercise, changed their diets, avoided toxins, who are sleeping correctly, and managing their stress. Usually that's where we start off, is we look at the couple, because fundamentally we need both of them to be in good state of health in order for us to achieve pregnancy. And then we look at what in each individual's life is an obstruction to their fertility, whether it be perhaps that they are not eating as a result of stress, perhaps they're not sleeping sufficiently, perhaps they have underlying issues. We could have thyroid issues, we could have clotting problems, we could have cholesterol issues. So generally speaking, when someone comes to see a homeopath, such as myself, they are not starting off with the homeopath from a place of good health. We then have to move them to that place of good health before we then assess where are we in terms of a timeline, what is happening in terms of their fertility health, and in other words, have we found an issue as to why they are not falling pregnant? And then very importantly is, what's the next step? Is it necessary for us to go an IVF route? Is it necessary for us to perhaps look for donors? Is it necessary for us to perhaps give it some more time, because maybe all that's needed is a bit more time, So that's usually where we start off with the patients from a homeopath perspective.
That's surprising to me, because I thought that someone that would choose to go the natural route, if I can call it that, would perhaps start with doing their own thing as I described, but then go to a homeopath and then go another more allopathic medical route.
No.
Okay, so it sounds like that's the trend. They go one route and then they end up at the homeopath. But if you could wave your magic wand, what would your preferred order of consult be for someone trying to fall pregnant?
So for me, it would absolutely be at least with about 6 months before deciding to actually start conceiving, would be to clean up, in other words, sort of address health concerns, get checked, look at what's happening in your family. What are the trends in your family? If diabetes is your type 2 diabetes is a trend in your family, go and get checked out. Have a look and see if you're starting to show those signs. If cardiovascular disease is something in your family, go to the appropriate medical practitioner or homeopath, if that's your choice, and get on top of your health. Because generally what we see is, and I do feel that this thought pattern is changing. It is at snail pace though, but it is changing. Previously, it was very much thought that as soon as I'm pregnant, I will then sort out my health issues. It's really far too late, because at that point you already have it's obviously an embryo and then develops into a fetus, but that child is already on board and you need to be in your best state already at that point. That is not the point that you start to correct things. Things need to already have been corrected. So for me, if I had to wave the magic wand, would be for people to actually understand that you want 100% baby, you know, and in order to achieve that, it's not just about a 50% from him and a 50% from her, but rather 100% from him and 100% from her. And then once you get to that point of deciding, right, we've now improved our health, my blood sugar is under control, I've lost the weight that I needed to lose, I'm fit and I'm able to run maybe a 5K, or maybe I'm able to run for 5 minutes without, you know, losing my breath and going into cardiac arrest. But once you get to that point, you then go, right, we are now in a healthier place, now let's attempt conception.
Because pregnancy is going to draw on everything from the mother's body in order to facilitate the development of this child. Am I right?
Absolutely. You know,
so it would be akin to getting in a car that's beaten up, broken, missing parts and trying to fix it while you're driving.
That's a very good analogy. And the truth is, as natural as the process is, as much as this has gone on for years and years and years, during that time of pregnancy, you know, you've got to consider what is happening to that mother's body. You know, she's losing abdominal space. Her capacity for breathing is going to reduce because of this intrauterine little mite that keeps growing. You know, she's not going to be able to... Sorry, that's my son screaming. Mason! You know, you've really got to look at what this is going to do to her. She's going to, you know, her intra-abdominal pressure is going to increase. What does that mean for her in terms of her ability to consume a meal? It's going to reduce. You know, she's not going to be able to, you know, eat the big meals that she may have been having beforehand. You've got to then look at nourishment. Oh, I'm going to turn my son. Mason!
I'm leaving this in, by the way. This is real.
I get it.
And we're talking about fertility, and the result of your having been fertile is screaming in the background right now.
A screaming 5-year-old, you know, and it's that little boy's high pitch that just really gets...
It's piercing to a concentrated conversation.
Yes, right. Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you pick up?
Pardon?
You want to carry on from where you left off?
No, I pretty much said it. It's
okay,
just
great.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, so, and having said that, it's really incredible to see pregnant women eating a box of chocolates and having just one Coke and just one cup of coffee and just one cigarette because someone told them that just one is fine, and putting on, well, can I go here? But, you know, putting on an enormous amount of the wrong weight in the first trimester of pregnancy. I've never understood how they can be so unhealthy while producing a child within them. I feel like my lingo is completely wrong. I'm using all the wrong language to describe this to a person that gets it more than anything. I wanted to ask you, so you've been speaking about women and couples, but how much do men feature in the medical inquiry or homeopathic inquiry into fertility?
It's massive. It's absolutely huge. It's 50% of the time. It's 50% of the chunk of the issue. And not to say that all male partners will have a problem, but the truth is that a lot of male partners may have a problem. And, you know, you see, I've been in practice for 10 years, and you really do start to see the trends in terms of where men are in that particular point in life. When I was in my 5th year and I was starting my research dissertation on unexplained infertility, I came across a very interesting study that really broke down, and perhaps this has changed. This was about 10, 11, 12 years ago. Perhaps they've done further studies on it. I haven't followed up on. But they were breaking down in terms of the most basic animalistic need. And they say that with women, their most animalistic need is the need to reproduce. Whereas for men, it would only be a secondary need. For a man, if he can provide and protect, then that's okay. So for a lot of these couples, when the female partner is saying, I don't feel complete, there is something missing, and I'm devastated every single month, the male partner is really looking at it going, it's okay. I mean, this is a problem. They are definitely identifying this as a problem. However, they're going, but it's okay. I can provide, I can protect, and we're okay. We have each other. So there is a little bit of a disconnect. And usually at that first appointment, you can really see how long things have been going on for, or how connected they are in understanding each other's need and where the other person's coming from. So at times we have male partners who sit there with their wives and go, this is devastating to me because it's devastating to her. Where for them, the devastation is really in the fact that their wife feels so broken. And then you have the cases where the male partner is feeling a little bit attacked, because in the sense that she's devastated, it could be my fault. Almost a fear that I could be responsible for that devastation. So I think it's a very, very untouched topic in the sense of the male perspective of fertility and that male journey in terms of fertility.
Jeez, it sounds like a whole lot of stuff going on here. You've got the psychology, you've got the hormones, and you've got ego that plays a part.
Completely. And the fact is, you really have to address each and every single element. So a lot of my approach with the men is that this is not their fault. They're not choosing to have this problem. And that it doesn't mean that they are less of a man. And that they are really just victims of how their lifestyle has affected their health. So I do take quite a lot of time sitting and we really sit with the couples and really explain on a step-by-step basis what affects, the next thing. So, if we're having huge amounts of stress, your body's immediately going to go into a response of, I need to survive, I don't need to reproduce. So for these men, I think for most men, is that if they can understand where all these building blocks sort of come together, and they see that this is not their choice, this is also not an error, and they have not fallen short, that then we can sort of take hands and look at how we're going to approach this and correct this going forward.
Unexplained infertility, that was your dissertation, yes?
Yes.
But, I mean, this is a fascinating topic, and I feel that we could go on and on and on and bring other people in to go on with us about this, but we'll have to wrap up shortly. I get that. I love the advice that you gave, that if you're thinking of having a child, 6 months before you start trying, start getting the engine to this thing right by getting healthy, eating healthily, and so on. But then when the 6 months has elapsed and you're kind of there and you're ready, what's that next step as far as you're concerned? Besides just, bonking.
It's way more than that. So for me, I would say then give it 6 months.
Okay, so try for 6 months.
Because fundamentally, in that first 6 months while you're getting healthy, you are still trying, essentially. No one's saying switch it off completely. Yeah. But, with trial and error, maybe 1 month you'll be healthier than the next month. But really give yourself those 6 months. And sometimes what I like to say, if you can label it, like this is our healthy 6 months, you're still trying. We're just correcting our health issues in this time. And from that 6 month point to the year mark, I would say then this is where you now start to try in the sense of calculating ovulations, timed intercourse, and really gearing up towards it, where it's now we are basically excluding possibilities in the sense of, that you definitely have got the right days in terms of ovulation. We know that there is ovulation happening. And then I would then mark that as this is what the next 6 months is going to be your, let's try and fall pregnant 6 months. At that point, after a year, if nothing has happened within that year, you would still not be classified as having a problem. According to World Health Organization, they deem 2 years as the cutoff point at which you can say something may be wrong. However, I personally, as a woman, wouldn't recommend going at it again for the next, you see nothing has happened in the first. That's not to say that there is something wrong, but I would then, if I had waved my magic wand, having had the first 6 months of healthy changes, having had the next 6 months of actually trying, timing cycles, timing intercourse, at that point, I would then go and consult with a homeopath and say, we've done this for a year. can you assist us? Perhaps let's look at blood tests. Perhaps let's look at what else is underlying. Perhaps let's go further based on each individual's history. And then from that point, you've still got a year to play with before you would actually need to consider taking more of a drastic step if that was actually necessary.
Dr. Bianca de Canha, fantastic advice. Now, you're legally open from this week, am I right?
That's correct.
All right, so you're able to see people, obviously, like other practitioners of any sort. There are limits based upon your number of people, procedures, and so on.
Yeah.
But you are available to be seen one way or another. Where can people find you?
So I practice at the Pure Health Center in Krugersdorp. It is a multidisciplinary practice. So for the moment, what we have done is we have allocated days for allocated practitioners. This is so that we can absolutely make sure that we have one person in the practice at a time. Every single precaution has been taken in terms of from the minute the person gets out their car to the minute they are back in their car. And where we have people who are at risk or have been exposed, we are legally allowed to perform telephone consults or online consults so that we can make sure that everyone has access to the healthcare that they have a right to.
Excellent. www.purehealthclinic, is it?
Pure Health Center.
purehealthcenter.co.za. Dr. Bianca de Canha, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason.